Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth, the Education Coordinator for Marlene's Market and Deli. Tonight's special guest that we have with us is Michelle Kester. She is the health coach at Beometry, located here in Tacoma, Washington. And we are so grateful to have her with us. Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Should I get going then? Awesome. Okay. Yeah. So thank you again, Elizabeth and Marlene's, for having me here. And thank you to all of you who are here to receive some information. So yes, the goal of the presentation today is really to teach you the 3 steps I took to end an over 8-year struggle with binge eating and overeating, and really just feeling out of control with food. This presentation is going to be perfect for you if you're any of these things. You're somebody who maybe you try to eat healthy all day, and maybe you're even quite good at that, but you keep finding yourself cheating or overeating on like weekends or evenings, or you find that certain foods you just can't keep in the house. You can wave or say yes if that's you, or you'll just eat them all. Or maybe you're just tired of like short-term diets, and you want something that is actually going to last. Or maybe you're tired of feeling guilty about every time that you try to eat a treat, or eat out with friends. Any of those things, or if you're just here because you want to learn how to quickly end food obsession, binge eating, emotional eating, and do that without like long hours of therapy, without giving up on your health and fitness goals, and without also just relying on willpower, which is a lot of what contributed to my struggle when I was trying to end this for myself. So so a little bit about me then. I am, like Elizabeth said, a health and fitness coach. And about 3 years ago, I ended my own struggle with binge eating. And since then, I have been able to help several other women go from years or decades even of struggling with binge eating, going on and off diets, or obsessing about food and their bodies. And I've been able to help them to create a healthy and positive relationship with food and exercise, and one where they're actually consistently doing that in a sustainable way. And so I've also helped with Beometry dozens of men and women have breakthroughs in their health and fitness overall. So whether that's running the longest distance they've ever run, or actually enjoying exercise for the first time, or building 10 pounds of muscle, or some people losing 10, 20, or 30 pounds, if that's what was good for them, or just having overall more love for themselves and their bodies. So that's a little bit about what I've done, but it hasn't always been this way for me. Just a few years ago, I was in a similar place to a lot of you. So to kind of give you some backstory here, and feel free to nod or anything, or say something in the comments if you relate to any of this. My binge eating was actually at its worst about 11 years ago. And it was a very frustrating time for me because I was actually also at that time trying my hardest to eat healthy. And I find this is a common theme with a lot of the people that I meet who are struggling with binge eating and overeating. So a day for me at that time would look like this. I would start the day with great intentions. I would eat healthy all day long. I would be happy with that. And then at some time around like 4 or 5 p.m., it was like I turned into a completely different human being. It was like I didn't care about all the promises I'd made to myself. I was like, F it, I just want to eat food. That's all I want to do. So at the end of the day, over and over and over, I'd find myself in my room alone, eating bowls and bowls of ice cream, oats, peanut butter, you name it, whatever I could get my hands on. So that's how it was over and over. And I knew I needed to end that cycle, but I just wasn't. So if you're here, you're probably wondering, how did I actually break that cycle? Well, again, here, I'm going to share several kind of rock bottoms that I hit, where I tried different solutions to end binge eating. And again, feel free to say, like, that's me in the comments, or just nod your head a little bit if you relate to any of these rock bottom moments that I had, or if you tried anything similar. So one of my first biggest rock bottom moment was actually in my freshman year of college, and I had gained some weight. I'd hit the highest weight that I had been in my life at the time, and that freaked me out. Okay. And also, at this very moment, I was lying on the floor of my dorm room, and I was trying to finish an essay that was due at midnight. And I was feeling absolutely sick to my stomach, horrible, a bunch of brain fog, couldn't think through this essay because I just spent the prior couple hours procrastinating on this essay, eating a bunch of Pop-Tarts. And surrounding me were these empty wrappers of Pop-Tarts. So I was lying there, and I thought to myself in that moment, I was like, I can't have this keep being this way. I have to change something. And so in that moment, I decided my solution was going to be, I was going to start running and exercising regularly. For me, I thought, okay, that's going to help me lose weight. That's going to help me with this problem. So the thing that did do was it did help me lose weight. However, it did not solve the binge eating problem. In fact, it made it much worse because I kept trying to control my food more and more and more. So I actually lost weight to a point where I lost so much that I actually lost my menstrual cycle. And maybe you've been there, maybe you haven't, but many people who've struggled with binge eating have ended up in that sort of situation. We get so obsessed with losing weight, and that's actually not the solution to binge eating. Okay, so another rock bottom moment for me was a few years later, and I was living in a house with a few different people, and I had actually taken the time in the day to throw away all the different possible foods I could binge on. And you can nod your head or just in your head say yes if that's you, you've tried that before. So for me, I did that. And that moment around 4 or 5 p.m. arrived yet again. And I didn't care about all the promises I'd made. And I reached into the cupboard, and I didn't have any of my binge foods. So I took out my housemate's big box of cereal, and I started eating their cereal. And for me, that was a huge rock bottom moment for me because I was ashamed of myself for having stolen somebody else's food just to support this habit. It was embarrassing, and that led to yet another solution. And that solution was I actually reached out to my boyfriend at the time, and I asked him to stop me from eating too much food. Now you might be able to guess how well that worked. Not very well. I ended up just trying to eat when he wasn't looking. It made it more of a habit that I kept secret. So again, it didn't fix the problem. It actually made it worse. Okay, so those are a couple of the rock bottom moments that I hit. For me, I tried even more different things. I tried just making up for the binge eating for a while and kind of ignoring it. I was a long distance runner, and I worked out 6 to 7 days a week, sometimes twice a day. I would count every single calorie that I ate, and I would make sure that I either fasted or worked that out off. And it was exhausting to do that, and it was obsessive. And so I didn't want my life to be that way either. At one point, I even gave my friend money for every time that I overate. And that ended in a few $100s extra in her pocket. And I realized that that wasn't going to work either. So with each of these solutions that I came up with, I decided today is the day I'm going to make a change. And every time I would come up with a new kind of tactic to try to control my behavior more. It was more about how can I get myself to try harder, be more committed, have more willpower. So that is actually what was the problem. Okay, so the turning point for me was actually when I started becoming a health and fitness coach. Became a fitness coach, and I was really good at exercise. I could help my clients with that. I could help them get better in that way. But underneath that, I felt like a bit of a fraud. And I also felt like at some point I couldn't help them because I couldn't help them in the area of food. And so I thought to myself, how can I help them when I can't help myself? So I have a question for you, and you don't have to answer it out loud, but just kind of think for yourself. Any of you, do you know that you're the kind of person who would do way more for others than you would ever do for yourself? I find this is really common with people who struggle with binge eating. Okay, so I had an epiphany moment. I realized I needed someone to do this for instead of just me. I needed support. And I couldn't have it be a secret anymore. I had to stop hiding, and I needed someone to hold me accountable. So I ended up hiring actually a life coach. She wasn't a nutrition or health specific kind of coach, but she was able to help me. And her strategy was really pretty simple. She used common sense to help me see from a new perspective. Okay, just new ways of thinking and noticing things that I was doing that were creating the problem that I hadn't realized. And she actually taught me how the brain, the human brain works, and how it's actually possible to rewire certain habits and patterns, and how I could break this cycle. So the last thing she was for me is she was just there every step of the way. She was cheering me on. She was there to help me make adjustments because the journey was not straight up. It was very down and up. Okay, so as a result of working with her for 3 months, I was able to stop binge eating completely, and I've never looked back. Okay, and that was about 3 years ago. I was then beyond that able to do so many other things that binge eating had been preventing me from doing. For example, I was able to start working on my gut health because before, going on a kind of strict protocol with food was impossible for me. But I could do that now that binge eating was no longer a problem. And I was also able to start stepping forward in my career and start building my own business and be a better coach, because now I no longer felt like a fraud, and because I also stopped procrastinating, because with all those times I would just eat instead of doing the thing that I knew that I wanted to do. And I also just knew that I could trust myself to fulfill on promises I made to myself, because I had finally done that when it came to food. So pause for a second. Another question for you here. What could you accomplish that you haven't been able to because of binge eating if food, exercise, and diet were no longer a problem for you? I just want you to kind of start to think about that. And I know it maybe sounds cheesy to think about that, but it's really powerful, okay? Because what you want to accomplish that this is preventing you from is exactly what will pull you forward. So, okay, enough of a backstory about me. The agenda here today is really to give you those 3 things that helped me. And I'm going to share them in detail here. These are the 3 things that made the biggest difference for me. And they're really what I wish I would have known when I was going through the journey of struggling with binge eating. Okay, so this is a great opportunity for you to take notes if you have a pen and paper. So I'll give you a second to pull that out while I get some water. So teaching number 1 for you here today. Teaching number 1. There is nothing wrong with you. Okay? There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. I wish I would have known this, because when I was struggling with binge eating, I felt like there was this other person inside of me, this like monster, binge eating monster. And I thought I had to fight that part of me. I thought it was a wrong part of me. And so I was always just trying to control myself more and more. So the problem with this is that, just think about this, for example. What's the first thing that you want to do tonight when I tell you that starting tomorrow, you cannot eat any more ice cream? And you don't have to answer out loud, but isn't it ice cream? You want to eat ice cream. Okay, this is just how the brain works. It's the same as something like, what's the first thing that you think of when I say, don't think about a yellow elephant? Now, aren't you thinking about a yellow elephant? Okay, so fighting against that part of you doesn't work. Okay, it drives the behavior more. Another analogy I really like is thinking about if you ever have tried to train a new puppy. Okay, I've done some work training actually my sister's puppy, and he likes to be pretty defiant. And when I got angry at him, he would actually get more defiant. When I would chase after him in those moments, he would run away and get harder to catch. So if you've ever experienced something like that, you can see it's like very natural to be like, as soon as you are fought against, you just want to rebel. Okay, so along my journey, what my coach taught me is that instead of fighting and ignoring and trying to control that monster, what we have to do instead is we have to try to start understanding it. Understanding that binge part of us. Okay, what's driving us to do that? So through this understanding and awareness about what was going on inside me, I was able to stop doing the things that harmed me with more ease, because I was coming from a place of love and understanding. And I was able to stop doing the things that were driving me to binge. And I was able to start making conscious choice about what I did or I didn't want, instead of trying to control myself all the time. So this, working on this is always the first thing I do with my clients. And this is because this is where we start to see a person who can now, instead of feeling like they have to eat everything on the plate, they can stop eating because they're full, because it's their choice, not because they have to, just because they want to. Okay, and that is possible. It is possible. I've had many clients who've done it, and myself too. So again, it's not about willpower. It's not about, I just need to try harder. It's about understanding what's going on, why you're being driven to do that. So some helpful kind of questions you can take away for yourself, ways of asking yourself are, why am I doing this? Why do I do what I do? Why do I feel this drive to binge? Is there a physical need for food? Am I depriving myself? Or am I depriving myself in some other way? How am I creating this problem? And why am I creating this problem? So one example for me is that I was trying to control my food so tightly, I didn't realize where I was actually cutting my calories too low. So to give you kind of a more real life situation, an example of this, I'll share a story from one of my clients that I work with. And we will call her Sally, okay, for the sake of not sharing her actual name. So Sally had spent her entire life since childhood, in this struggle with feeling like she needed to lose weight and losing it and then gaining it back again over and over and over, and never really reaching the point that she wanted to get to. Over time of struggling with this, binge eating also became a problem. Okay, she would have this pattern of she would eat perfectly all day, or even for a kind of several months span. And she would get to a point where she could lose maybe 10 or 20 pounds. But then when she hit that point, she would think to herself something like, oh, I've finally reached this part of like this goal. So now I deserve a break. And when that moment happened, guys, if you feel like you need a break, there's something wrong with the process. Okay. But when she would hit that moment, then she would go back and she would start binging again. And it would just be a whole nother cycle of the same thing. So again, what we realized for her is that she was creating a way of getting to that goal that she didn't like, that wasn't sustainable, that wasn't actually even good for her. So in the end, she was just wanting to quit as soon as she reached her goal, which is not going to make it sustainable whatsoever. So now when we started teaching her how to start consciously making her own choices because she wanted to, making a plan that she loved, that she could follow, that maybe wasn't as aggressive, but it was sustainable, then not only did she stop binge eating in just a couple of weeks, but she started just like, she would get on phone calls with me and she'd be like, Michelle, I'm doing great. I looked up some new recipes and I tried them out. And she was all excited about eating healthy on her own terms in a way that she loved. Okay. And then even after that, a few weeks later, she was doing the same thing even with her workouts. She was starting to do workouts that she actually liked instead of forcing herself to do all this hard, complicated stuff that she didn't like. Okay. First several months, her weight became stable. It wasn't fluctuating all over the place anymore. Okay. Now she's on her journey to start to gradually lose weight, but she's not in a hurry about it. She's not obsessed about it. It's not consuming her life. Okay. So another example from another client that I worked with. So let's call her Susan and Sally. So Susan was a hardworking lawyer. She was a mom of two. She was actually very fit, very active, a long distance runner, very disciplined individual, and very busy. Okay. Now, she, when she would get on a diet or program, was religious about that diet. She would stick to it to the T. So when she came to me, she actually asked me, she said to me, I just need someone to hold me accountable, because she had gotten to a point where she wasn't on a diet and she had just gone to Screw Itville and just eaten all the bags of chips and feeling really horrible about it. So she even went on a 3-year diet. She lasted a whole 3 years on this diet. And she said, yeah, I did it perfectly. But in the end, again, it was back to the same old. So what we did for her, similar to the client I mentioned before, we started working on creating a way of making choices that she actually liked. Also, making those choices from her own knowledge instead of from somebody else's random plan. Okay. When she started doing that, in 4 weeks, she wasn't binge eating anymore. She wasn't eating whole bags of chips, not because she had self-control. It was just because that's what she wanted to do. And in 12 weeks, she started actually losing weight. And she was like, yeah, I'm not even doing any dieting. And she loved herself just the way she was. Okay. So that is the end of teaching number 1. I hope you're taking some notes. Okay. And if you relate to any of these stories, definitely take notes on those. So teaching number 2 is self-trust can be learned. Self-trust can be learned. Okay, so since I was a kid, I always had felt like the things that I struggled with or wasn't good at, I was just born that way. That's just what life dealt me. Okay, and then I had to live with that forever. So particular things like felt like I was very quiet. I was very shy. I was a big procrastinator. Okay, we'll just stick with those three, although I had many more. Okay, so now over time, one by one, I was able to learn that I was able to shift those things for myself. Now, how did I do that? Well, the first one, for example, I felt like I was always someone who was quiet. When I became a trainer, I found out that as a trainer in large groups, you have to speak loud. Otherwise, your clients won't know what you're saying. So I went and I showed up being a trainer, and I was very quiet, and always my clients over and over would be like, speak up, speak up. Enough times I kept showing up. Eventually, finally, I found my voice. And I was able to be loud. Woo! Another example, when I started my own business, I had to put myself out there. I just had to. So I no longer could be shy. So I kept showing up. And what do you know? I was able to learn to not have to be shy anymore. Procrastination. Any binge eating helped with that. But one of the most direct ways that I helped myself with that is I actually started making bigger commitments and promises. Why? Because the bigger commitment or promise pulled me into no longer being a procrastinator. So this taught me that anything can be learned. So when I struggled with control around food, I realized that I needed to learn that skill of trusting myself around food. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, how do you build trust with yourself around food, especially around those foods that are particularly triggering, particularly delicious? Okay, so think about this. How do you build courage? How do you build courage? You build courage by being courageous. Isn't that funny? The only way you can build courage is by doing courageous things. Now, you don't always have to like head dive into the water and do something crazy, but you can take tiptoes. Like, you can put your toe in the water and be a little brave, and then you can put your foot in the water. And so I find that when it comes to food, people will avoid the foods that they don't trust themselves around. They will stay away from triggering situations. They will try to hyper control their environment. But this just makes your life smaller and smaller. You can do less and less. You can't go out with friends and family because of all the foods that might be there. Okay. One of my clients that I mentioned earlier, one of her biggest successes was when she was able to go to a birthday party and she had a piece of cake, and that was okay. And she wasn't afraid of eating the whole cake. So to build trust, we have to give ourselves opportunities to prove that trust to ourselves. So have the trigger food in your life. Of course, not all of them at once, maybe, but step by step. Build trust in yourself and in your body. Okay, so I'm going to take a sip of water while you kind of take that in. So I'll give you an example of a real life situation where this helped one of my clients. So I had a client, let's call her Beatrice. Okay, Beatrice was a cook. Okay, so you can imagine struggling with binge eating and being a cook is very difficult. And she had actually, when I met her, lost quite a bit of weight, but she felt like she kind of hit a plateau. And she thought that was because she was still struggling with binge eating and had never really dealt with that. Okay. because she had done it mostly through exercise. So Beatrice, she had actually, before I met her, also struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction. So she agreed with me that this was something that she could overcome and that trust could be learned. But this food was harder. It was harder than alcoholism and drug addiction for her because food was all around her. She couldn't just go cold turkey and just cut it out of her life. You can't do that with food because you have to have it. You need it. So she realized she couldn't solve this in the same way by just tossing those things out of her life. She had to build trust in herself. So what we did is we started breaking some of her rules around food. She started allowing herself to eat things that she had been limiting before. And she started allowing herself to follow through on making choices that she felt good about when it came to food, eating some, but not too much. So this was scary at first, but eventually she got to a place where it became a lot easier. One of her successful moments was when she got at the end of the workday and she'd always been triggered by the leftover foods in the kitchen as a cook. And she felt like, she felt horrible about throwing them away. So she would eat all of them. And so she was able to toss them and not eat them, okay? Because she started building that trust in herself. So now, fast forward a few months, she's eating a diet that she is happy with, where she has some treats sometimes, but also healthy food. She feels good about it. She's started exercising more regularly and finding a way of exercising that she actually loves and can maintain. And she's now even gotten to the point where she's gotten so confident in herself and her trust in herself that she's now on her way to becoming a health coach herself. So she's actually taking classes and courses for that, which I think is absolutely amazing. Amazing. So that is teaching number 2. Okay. So teaching number 3, support. Support breaks the cycle of shame, which is necessary to end binge eating. Okay, support breaks the cycle of shame. So let me remind you that I spent years trying to do this on my own. Years, okay? I didn't want help because I was supposed to be healthy. I was supposed to be the fitness guru. I was supposed to be the best. So I read books by myself. I tried to do those things on my own that the book said to do. But again and again, I kept trying to solve my problem with the same thinking, my own perspective, and I needed a new one. So the thing that made the difference for me was when I finally gave myself the support that I needed. Okay, what that did for me is a few different things. So the first thing it did, by the way, support can look so many different ways, but support is so huge. So what it did was it shifted my belief in myself. Okay, so I went from, I hope this will work, to this has to work because I have someone else here with me. I've got skin in the game. That makes a huge difference. Okay. It also shifted my belief in the sense that this is a shameful thing. We feel like we want to hide it. When we get help, we are showing ourselves, we are showing our highest selves that we are worthy of that support. And we are showing ourselves that we don't need to be ashamed. Okay, so it shifts your belief in yourself. It's a gift to yourself. Of course, also, just the power of having someone else join me, that human connection, no longer feeling like I was alone, and being able to touch base with them when things went down and when things went up was everything. The process is not linear. we have to have a way to adjust and change things up when there's downs. Okay, and then of course, there was just the simple accountability, knowing that she was there for me every week to help me follow through, to help me adjust, and that I wasn't going to hide anymore. So today, I'm constantly looking for ways to give myself support when I have something that I want to move forward with. So like, for example, I've had some chronic knee pain that lasted me for over 7 years. I connected with somebody who knew about that. And gosh, it was amazing for the first time when someone actually understood me. He helped me see the pattern I had created over time that had been creating this chronic pain. That was a whole new perspective. And then working with him together, again, was that faith in myself that I not only could solve this problem, I had to. I had to. Okay, so another real life example besides myself of this. So I have a client or I worked with a client, and we'll call her Samantha. I'm going with S's today, I guess. So Samantha, she's actually a bodybuilder. Okay, a bodybuilder. When we met, she was 11% body fat. She was also a fitness coach. And you can imagine she struggled with binge eating. And you can imagine that being at that position, she had so much shame. She was obsessed about food. It consumed her life. She was unhappy. She felt like a fraud. So for the longest time, she didn't get help. She was a hard worker. She had gotten really far when it came to her body. Like she was afraid of somebody seeing that. But finally, she got some support. Okay. And first of all, that broke that pattern, that cycle of shame. We have to break the cycle of shame because shame perpetuates addictive behavior. Okay. So when we started working together, first of all, it broke that cycle of shame. Then another thing that happened, okay, and this is an example of when things go up and down. So she went for a good span of 2 weeks, okay, where she had no binge eating and she was feeling awesome, okay? Then she binged, okay? All of a sudden, she was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. Maybe this isn't working. But instead of just deciding, oh, this is a failure, we were able to address it together, okay? And we learned something. We learned something from it. We learned that she had been under fueling at lunch, and she had also been feeling shame about eating sweets at work. This is something she had not mentioned before. But adjustment and knowing that the process wasn't linear, she touched base to get that extra support. So we started fueling her better, started giving her more fun things to eat throughout the day, changing her mindset about whether it was okay or not to eat sweets at work. The cravings started to fade away. Okay, months later, no more binges. Okay, 5 months later, this was actually just last week. It was so cool. She had given me a ring. I missed the call, but she left a voicemail. And she was saying how happy she was with her life, how her mindset had shifted so much. She was so happy that she didn't struggle with food anymore. Okay. She was able to focus on time with her nephews and nieces, which she so loved. Okay. So that is teaching number 3, right? So as a kind of recap here, number 1, there is nothing wrong with you. You don't have to fight yourself. If you're fighting yourself, that's probably not going to be a lasting solution. Seek first to understand. Understand what's driving this behavior. If you do that, I promise you that awareness makes it so much easier to change. Okay, teaching number 2, trust can be built. You do not have to be at the whim of every trigger anymore. You can build trust in yourself around various triggers, around various foods. Yes, it's a process. It's not always easy, but you can do it. You can build trust. Okay. Third thing, support breaks the cycle of shame. You show yourself that you are worthy of support. You show yourself that it is okay to share what you're going through. You don't have to be ashamed of it. And again, there's nothing wrong with you. Okay. So those are the 3 teachings that really changed my life, that changed my clients' lives. Now, we haven't talked about the behaviors, thoughts, and beliefs that keep each of you individually stuck, okay? Or specific things that you can do to actually start building trust in yourself around the foods that trigger you, or even what it actually means to get support for you, because everyone's way of getting support is different. So that's why I am offering a free 60-minute call to each and every one of you, anyone who is watching, okay, where I'll help you clarify exactly what the thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors that are keeping you stuck in that cycle, fighting yourself. And I'll teach you how to actually reverse those, rewire them, so you can start making healthy choices that excite you, that are sustainable. Okay. So again, if you don't know what's driving this behavior, it's just an endless battle of fighting yourself. You might lose weight for a period, or even like for 3 years, like my client did, but then eventually it goes back to the same. You can ignore the problem like I did for many years, but at the cost of maybe feeling like a fraud, or some kind of lack of confidence in yourself, or just continuing to put off the things that you have been wanting to accomplish, that this has been stopping you from doing. Okay, so in order to address your individual struggles, we have to talk on an individual level. Just like my chronic pain coach did for me when he helped me go back and realize what things had led up to this, so that I could go back and actually reverse them. Okay. In order to get clear on exactly what you need to end your struggle with diet and food, which is totally unique, then I would love to set up this free call with you here, and we can do that today. So as far as how to actually do that, so I will share my phone number. Okay. So all you have to do is text me your name and what you would most like to accomplish. Okay. And then we can set up a time for that free 60-minute call. I will type my phone number in the box. I will say it also to anyone who's watching the recording. So it's 253-273-7045. Okay, so that's my phone number. Now, if you're on here, I think some of you are, especially if I invited you from somewhere I met you online, maybe. So if that's you and you're outside of the US or anything like that, you can also reach me through email. My email is michekester@gmail.com. Okay, so that's most of my first name, my last name @gmail.com, and I'll put it in the chat box as well. So again, what we do on this call is we clarify your individual thoughts, habits, beliefs, behaviors. We clarify what's driving you to binge, or what's driving you to stay stuck in this yo-yo cycle. And I'll teach you how you can rewire your brain and reverse those. Okay. And that's important, because knowing those things, or without knowing those things, you'll continue just trying harder to control yourself. And that's just not sustainable. It's exhausting. So again, that's why I'm offering this free call. let's get together and I'll teach you how to end binge eating and yo-yo dieting for good. Okay. And yes, that is all I have. So thanks so much for being here, all of you. Looking forward to talking to some of you. And yes, Elizabeth, thanks again for having me. Feel free to say whatever you normally say at the end.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Oh my gosh, what an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so
thank you.
Oh, you're
Great.
so welcome.
Great presentation.
Great. Yes. So, and if any of you now, as we have a couple minutes at the end, if any of you have any questions that you would like to ask, feel free.
Yeah, feel free, folks. We are going to say goodbye to our Facebook Live friends. And stay tuned, folks.